Welcome to Pro Football Now. It's week 11 of the NFL season. I'm Amy Campbell filling in today for Maggie Gray, and Albert Breer of the MMQB is joining me to break it all down as always. Albert, we'll start with our favorite segment, Emptying the Notebook, and let's start with Martellus Bennett. Always a character, always an interesting story. Quite a drama this week with him. Released by the Packers, says he doesn't want to play anywhere, says he wants to retire and have surgery. Lo and behold, he's on the field on Sunday for New England. We're all laughing about this, but could there possibly be an investigation for collusion here?
I don't think that there's going to be much of an investigation. I don't think there's going to be much they're going to be able to find. This is a little bit like the situation with LeGarrette Blount 3 years ago when Blount flat out quit on the Steelers. He winds up being claimed off of waivers by the Patriots and becomes an important part of their Super Bowl run that year. There's only one place I think Martellus Bennett wanted to play, and that was New England. And so it's well within his rights to make decisions on his body as he sees fit. And, you know, in Green Bay, I know a lot of the people in that building felt like he quit after Aaron Rodgers got hurt. Decided, okay, season's over, I'm going to go get my surgery. And he's well within his rights to say that to every team he wants to say that to. So if his agent was talking to the Cardinals, or if his agent was talking to the Steelers, or his agent was talking to the Raiders, and he says, okay, well, if it's going to be there, then I'm going to have the surgery. What can you do? I mean, it's part of the built-in advantage the Patriots had in this situation. A, because they're going to have the ability to compete at a championship level, so that appeals to a player like that with a healthy quarterback, which he didn't have in Green Bay. And then B, they have the background with the players, so they know how he fits into their system. This is a guy who obviously has had some issues because guys that talented don't bounce from team to team to team, and he's been on 5 teams now. But he's fit. He's found a way to fit in New England. They wanted him. He decided, okay, I'm willing to put off my surgery to play for this one particular team. And so things lined up the way they did. And the Patriots get this player for less than $500,000 for the rest of the year.
So he says after this Patriots game that he had told his agent, tell everyone I'm not interested, I'm just going to retire. Do you think there are any teams that passed on him that may have grabbed him? Now they're seeing him on the field for New England, catching 3 passes. He's in Green Bay saying, I'm sick. Now he's a star in Foxborough.
Yeah. You know what, Amy? I think the problem is that there weren't very many teams that he was going to play for. Yeah. So even if they claimed him, that I think say Tennessee claims him. Tennessee's 6-3 right now. They're very much in contention. I think he probably says to Tennessee, you know what, I'm all set. I got my Super Bowl ring last year. I'm going to go ahead and have the surgery. I'm done playing football. I think this New England situation was very unique in that way. And so you could argue, you could legitimately argue, maybe another AFC team should have seen this coming and put in a claim on him to prevent this from happening, and that would have been okay too. But Marty always held that hammer where he could say, if you claim me, I'm just going to go ahead and have the surgery. If I go to New England, then I'll go ahead and play through it. And so worked out for him, worked out for the Patriots, and they get a layer of depth at a position where they need it because they've got a great player there. Naturally, because they've got a great player there in Gronkowski, that's where their offense runs through. It's a tight end-centric offense, and now they've got a little depth at the position which they needed.
A huge deal made about Ezekiel Elliott being out, but Tyron Smith also out for the Cowboys. Dak Prescott sacked 8 times. Poor Chaz Green made Adrian Claiborne look like a defensive MVP out there. Claiborne, 6 sacks. Yeah. Who is more valuable to the Cowboys, Zeke or Smith? You
know, what's funny is that I know the narrative became after the game that is because Chaz Green was out there and because Chaz Green, gave up the 6 sacks to Adrian Claiborne, that Tyron Smith's more valuable than Ezekiel Elliott. And Tyron Smith's maybe the best left tackle in football, so I'm not minimizing what he is. But as over the course of that narrative emerging, I think Zeke became a little underrated, and here's why. He's as efficient a runner as there is in the NFL, and I've talked to coaches about this. Their feeling was if we've got Ezekiel Elliott in the game, getting to 2nd and 6 is almost automatic. We can count on getting 3 or 4 yards on first down, no matter how we block it up. Well, that means that more often than not, they're in 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5. They're in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2. That's a lot different than being in long yardage. That creates a different situation for your offensive linemen. And the Cowboys were able to win without Tyron Smith last year. Chaz Green is their left tackle for 2 games last year, not counting the last game, which was a throwaway. They were able to win without Tyron Smith last year. And if you look at the numbers, they bear out. Against Atlanta, 16 of their first 17 second downs were 2nd and 8 or longer. it creates a completely different circumstance for the offensive linemen who now are dealing with pass rushers pinning their ears back, and it creates a different situation for Dak Prescott, who's in a lot more obvious passing situations because Zeke's not in there.
So why not make adjustments when you see Chaz Green is having a rough time right now? Why not make adjustments for him?
I mean, I think that they could have made a little bit more of a commitment to the running game, but I mean, look, the bottom line is Alfred Morris and Darren McFadden just aren't as explosive. They don't have the vision. They don't have the decisiveness that Zeke has. And so that element of his game, and Zeke's one of these players who does everything well. And so I think what the tendency of everyone to do is to pluck out the 80-yard run from his rookie year, or pluck out his ability to catch the ball and say, well, this is what's spectacular about him. But it's the little thing. It's that efficiency. That, okay, well, maybe another back would have gotten a yard or two here, but I'm going to get 3 or 4 because I'm going to see it faster. I'm going to get there faster than the other back. That's the difference, and it's really, really hard to recreate that if you don't have a back who's close to as explosive. And Morris and McFadden are good backs, but they're not Zeke. And so I think Tyron Smith was a huge, don't get me wrong, I think Tyron Smith was a huge loss. Mm-hmm. But the power of Ezekiel Elliott to take 1st and 10 and turn it into 2nd and 6, I don't think should be underrated. I don't think should be ignored.
Well, and they're going to be missing him for a little while. They have the Eagles next, thankfully, in Dallas. But coming off of a bye, that's definitely going to be a tough one for them. Albert, let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. 6 wins for the first time since 2010. An ugly win over the Chargers there in Jacksonville. This is a game this team would have historically lost. 2 interceptions from Blake Bortles. They overcome that. They overcome the dumb penalties. Marqise Lee celebrating a flag thrown on his opponent.
Right.
Have they turned a corner here?
I think it's going to sound weird, but this is almost like a coach's dream, what happened on Sunday, because you have all of those teaching points, and it's still a young team. I mean, you're Jalen Ramsey, who was involved in the altercation with A.J. Green. You're Dante Fowler. You're Blake Bortles is still young. Leonard Fournette. There's a lot of youth in that team. Marqise Lee is still a young player. And so, to me, this is a coach's dream because you get all those teaching points, but you didn't have to take a loss to do it. And so I'm sure it's going to be a hard week for some guys there. I love how they've built an identity for that team, and a big part of that identity is having that hard edge and playing a physical brand on the offensive side through the offensive line, being able to get after it through the defensive line on the defensive side. And so part of their personality has been to be edgy. This is a good opportunity for that coaching staff to go in there and say, there's a line here. You guys crossed it a bunch of times. It almost cost us a game. We were lucky to get out of there with a win. You come out of that with a loss, you've got a lot worse taste in your mouth.
Jacksonville Jaguars, the best team in Florida. Who saw that coming preseason? Albert, thanks so much.
You got it.
And now our friends over at Pro Football Focus have their Well Actually of the Week on the Vikings wide receivers.
I'm Steve Palazzolo.
And I'm Sam Monson. We are Pro Football Focus, and this is Well Actually.
Sam, there are some great wide receiver groups in today's NFL, but well, actually, the best pair resides in Minnesota. It's Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs of the Vikings.
Yeah, it's time to stop talking about these two as just an underrated wide receiver group or a couple of guys that deserve more recognition. It's time to recognize these two as the best wide receiver pairing in the NFL in 2017. Both these guys are in the top 10 in PFF's overall wide receiver rankings. The only team in the NFL with 2 receivers in that top 10. They've been incredibly productive. Thielen has the 3rd most receiving yardage of anybody in the league. Stephon Diggs has missed a couple of games injured, and he's still in the top 25 in that regard. So these two guys have been incredibly productive. They've been incredibly good, and they've been doing it without their top quarterback throwing them the ball for most of this season.
Yeah, so they've played with 1 week of exceptional Sam Bradford. He was great. And then they played with a half of one-legged Sam Bradford. Wasn't so good. But for the rest of the season, it's been Case Keenum, a guy who has a career passer rating of only 82. This year, they've elevated it to 92.6. From a grade standpoint, last year he was with the Rams grading at 64.5 in PFF grades. This year, a career high and sitting there in the middle of the pack among NFL quarterbacks. So we're talking about a receiver duo in Thielen and Diggs that have helped elevate their quarterback, led the Vikings to a 7-2 record, and made that a viable offense despite having Bradford injured and despite having Case Keenum, who on paper doesn't look like a great quarterback. So all of this production with Case Keenum at quarterback.
Yeah, just the 18th overall ranked quarterback so far this year for Keenum. What's really interesting to me, though, about this duo is that they've done it being complete opposites of the body types they should be for the positions they play in that offense. Everybody else is working on their Wes Welker cloning project for their slot receiver, these short, little shifty guys who can work inside. But the Vikings have found a 6'2", 200-plus pound receiver in Adam Thielen who can provide a vertical threat out of the slot, go deep over the middle, go across the middle, catch those tough balls, get significant yardage after the catch, and take big hits. He has the second most yards per route run from the slot this year, trailing only Pittsburgh's Juju Smith-Schuster, who has about half the number of total receptions that Thielen has from the slot. And then on the outside, where everybody's looking for a Julio Jones clone, a 6'3", 220-pound receiver, the Vikings have Stephon Diggs, who's barely 6 foot and 190, like 30 pounds lighter than Julio Jones. And yet Stephon Diggs leads the league this year in contested catch completion percentage. He's at 69%, which is higher than anybody else. So he's winning these tough catches that a guy with a significantly larger body type should be getting. So both these guys have managed to fulfill this role within the offense despite being not what teams are looking for. And I think that's a big reason why neither of these guys was drafted before the 5th round.
Yeah, and like you said, they win in many different ways. Diggs is a great route runner. Thielen can run routes, and they win in those contested situations. When you add it up, our analytics team ran some great numbers, and they said, look, who are the best supporting casts for quarterbacks during the PFF era dating back to 2006? The Vikings are right up there in a group with last year's Falcons that helped elevate Matt Ryan to MVP. The 2015 Cardinals that helped elevate Carson Palmer to his top season. 2015 Panthers helped elevate Cam Newton to his MVP season. And the 2015 Cincinnati Bengals that led Andy Dalton to his best statistical season. This Vikings group is in that similar boat, and it's all about Thielen and Diggs elevating Case Keenum's play, making them a viable pass game, and that's why they are the top wide receiver duo in the NFL.
It's time for Scott's Spotlight, as we have the pleasure of being joined by Scott McCloughan, former NFL GM and executive, one of the best talent evaluators out there. Scott, terrible news for one of your former teams, the Seahawks, as Richard Sherman goes down with that torn Achilles in Thursday Night Football. Last year, Earl Thomas got injured. This defense really suffered. They looked like a completely different team. You know these players and this organization better than anyone. Will this happen again now that Sherman's out?
You know, it's a good chance. Just from the standpoint, they'll stay in there and fight. And, you know, the thing about Richard, he's never been hurt with the Seahawks. And he's, you know, when you lose a talented player, a Pro Bowler, an All-Pro player, there's always a setback no matter what. You know, but again, you know, they have enough pass rush and they have enough versatility in the linebacker core that, and Pete's really, really good with the defense, as you guys are well aware. They'll find a way to adjust, but still, it's a huge loss. You know, it's like losing your quarterback on defense, you know, because he was the guy that they didn't go after, so he closed down half the field. And now that he's out, it's wide open, you know, so now the other 10 guys or an 11th guy coming in now to take over for him have to step up, and they have to improve their game and have to make sure they take care of each other. But, yeah, it's definitely – it hurts, and he's one of the best corners in the NFL.
Well, and his comments after the game almost sounded like he knew this was going to happen, that it had been bothering him all season and it was going to break eventually. Doug Baldwin also had some pretty intense comments saying that Thursday Night Football should be illegal. Is this only the players that feel this way, or are teams all around feeling this as well?
Well, I think the players feel that way because they play so hard on Sunday. Then you have a short week, you know, and you turn around and you really don't practice because you're trying to rest their bodies. You know, but you turn around on a short week and, you know, majority of the players nowadays at this time of the season, they have little nicks and knacks here and there. You know, but Achilles is something very scary. But the thing about Richard, he's not going to back down. He's going to play no matter what. And all of a sudden it's prime time. They love the limelight. They love their family watching them. They love their friends watching them. But, you know, it'd be like a boxer turn around 1 month after boxing and boxing again. Nah, they take 6 to 8 months off or a year off. With these players, they're battling, you know, every day, and especially on Sundays or Monday nights or Thursday nights, whatever. It's a dogfight, and I mean they're beating the crud out of each other, and to turn around so quick, and especially mid-season, towards the end of the season, things are going to happen. I mean, it's inevitable.
Scott, the Saints have won 7 games in a row. They're 7-2 right now, and it's not like Sean Payton hasn't had success there. He's won a Super Bowl, but this is a very different way of winning. They're 3rd in the NFL in rush offense. They're 8th in total defense. It feels like a different program almost. What's impressed you most about the way that they've been able to flip things around there?
Well, the thing that's unique, Albert, is the fact that, ever since Drew went to New Orleans, even he's in San Diego, when you scheme him alone. First of all, you worry about the pass. You don't worry about the run game. You don't worry about, you just worry about, okay, listen, if they're going to beat us, they're going to beat us with the pass because that's the best thing he does. And now what they proved this last weekend is incredible because they want losing the first 2 and everybody's like, wow, is Sean in trouble or is the team no good? Is Drew over his prime and all that? But for them to be able to come back and show what they did this last week, and especially this time point in the season, now all the coordinators that you're going against going forward in the playoffs, they're like, wow, we don't have to just worry about Drew. They got a run game, and then they got 2 backs that are balling, And the thing that's interesting was they run the ball well early with AP being there, but all of a sudden AP leaves. I think it loosened up the room, it loosened up the backs and the offensive coordinator to say, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pound the ball. We're going to make sure we run the ball. That way it takes care of Drew if he gets so many hits, instead of throwing the ball 35, 40 times a game, you get to throw 25, 30 times a game. So they're in a great spot right now. I wouldn't want to play him because I watched that game this Sunday, and then that run game was excellent.
And Scott, one thing that's interesting to me is how much they're relying on their rookies. And I talked to Sean about it last week, and he said their first 4 picks, they had first-round grades on each of those guys. Now I'm talking about Marshawn Lattimore there at 12th overall, Ryan Ramczyk at 32, and then they get Alvin Kamara, the back out of Tennessee, and Marcus Williams, the safety out of Utah. They really feel like they nailed those 4. If you can put together a draft class like that, what sort of difference does that make for you organizationally?
Well, the thing about it is it's so important, as you're well aware. I believe in the draft through and through. And to nail young guys, especially when you got kind of more of a veteran team, it adds energy, and we'll see how long it keeps going because, with these rookies, it's a long season for them, and all of a sudden, especially if you hit the playoffs, you're playing 17, 18, 19 games, whatever. But they did a nice job, and it's not an exact science, but they identified good football players, which I liked all 4 of them, as us with the Redskins as a group, we liked all 4 of them. But they also nailed a football player, it's not too big for them. And as you're well aware, Albert, with rookies, there's so much coming at you and so much mentally you have to deal with. They all have the physical skills, but, the scheme each week changing, adjusting, to the personnel. And they did a really nice job, and it's panning out. But that's what you have to do. In Seattle we did it, in San Fran we did it, and all of a sudden you start building stuff like that. Now you're building consistency. Now you're building a young core, knowing that you're veterans, you might have to move on from, but these guys have stepped up and proven that they can play in the NFL.
Scott, another 7-2 team. The Minnesota Vikings are in the thick of playoff contention. Case Keenum fresh off a 4-touchdown performance with a now cleared and dressed Teddy Bridgewater watching on the sidelines. If you're the GM of this team on a 5-game winning streak, not wanting to upset momentum, do you go with your hot veteran or do you go with your young franchise QB?
I would not rock the boat. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And Teddy's got a great career ahead of him. He's still young, of course, and I know he's they put him on the active list. They think he's healthy enough to practice and possibly play, but you're looking for the long haul with him. So let him just keep, rehab, let him keep practicing, keep him out of the mix. And if the case shows something that he falls off, which I don't see happening, because they got really good talent around him. I wouldn't rock the boat. You got momentum in the NFL. It's a short list. If you're rolling in the right direction, you keep rolling. And make them knock you off it. And I would think, knowing Zimmer and the kind of coach he is and the kind of personality he has, he's going to, they all love Teddy, which is good. He's a great guy. Like I said, he's got a lot of talent, and he's got a great career ahead of him. But right now, just keep winning games.
So if you don't play Teddy Bridgewater, how do you evaluate if he is the QB there moving forward?
Well, I think they already have an idea just from this talent standpoint, and he's proved it. The injury was severe, and you always worry about that. But with him coming back as soon as he did, I know it's been a year and a half, but I was told by people there that it might not be ever. And for them to activate him, they feel comfortable enough knowing that he was a high pick, knowing that he can go out on the practice field and practice full go. So things are going right medically. So it's one of those things where, the have two is great. Everybody says if you have two quarterbacks, you think both can start, then you don't have one. That's not true. Case, what the kind of numbers he's putting up and improvement he did from last year to this year, and then knowing that Teddy's there. But Teddy's a long haul answer, and that's why they took him so high. And you got to protect him against himself right now. But, if something happens with Case, and then you could put Teddy in, but I wouldn't rock the boat at all.
Well, it's certainly a good problem to have two great quarterback options, and wonderful to see Teddy Bridgewater back on the sidelines getting a little emotional there. Great to see him there. Scott, thanks so much for all of the insight. We really appreciate the time.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. Welcome to the Executive Suite. I'm Corey Parson, the Fantasy Executive, with your PFN Fantasy Football Report for week number 11. In week number 10, we saw some breakout performances. I'm here to let you know what that means going forward. Let's start with Charger running back Austin Ekeler. Ekeler earned 33% of the Chargers snaps on offense in week 10 and put up 26 fantasy points in PPR formats. If you are a Melvin Gordon fantasy owner, Austin Ekeler is a must-add. I still expect Melvin Gordon to lead the Charger backfield, but Ekeler is a Gordon injury away from being in the RB1 conversation for the rest of the way. The Jacksonville Jaguar passing attack is not really where you go to look for fantasy production, but in the last 4 weeks, Marqise Lee is wide receiver 16 in PPR scoring formats. Lee is the clear #1 option in the Jags passing attack. He has games of 10, 11, and 12 targets in the past month. Lee has scored touchdowns in each of his last 2 games, and this trend should continue as an efficient Blake Bortles is passing the football more and more each week. If you need wide receiver help for your stretch run, Lee is a must-add and a must-start in all fantasy formats. Our Symetra rising star for week number 11 is Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Robert Woods. Woods was almost our rising star for week 10, but there is no doubt that he gets the award for week 11. Woods, who is the top wideout in the NFL's top offense, is wide receiver 13 in PPR formats so far this season. Yet he is still on the waiver wire in the majority of fantasy leagues. Robert Woods is a must-start going forward. He is a player that will help you win your league. With your PFN Fantasy Football Report from the Executive Suite, I'm Corey Parson, the Fantasy Executive.
Thanks, Corey. This is Last Call. I'm Albert Breer, and the greatness of the Patriots was on display on Sunday. But this isn't about Tom Brady's 125 passer rating, or the 9 skill players who caught balls from him, or the line that shut down the Denver pass rush, or the special teams returning a kick for a touchdown, recovering a fumble, and blocking a punt, or even the suddenly resurgent defense holding the host to 16 points. It's about the smoldering mess that was on the other sideline. Look, it's fair to give Vance Joseph and his staff some time, particularly given the quarterback situation they inherited. After all, every team goes through its ebbs and flows. And that's the thing. That Broncos franchise that Joseph's leading isn't exactly the Browns. Denver's 5th in the league in wins since 2000, has made 8 playoff appearances over that time, and the Broncos were in 2 of the last 4 Super Bowls. Or if you want to make this simpler, and you can take it all the way back to the mid-'80s, what the Bolin family has built in Colorado stands as a model of NFL stability. But what's happened to them happens to most teams. A coach retired, a quarterback retired, and a few mistakes over the last few years have made them vulnerable in the aftermath. And you can go right down the list of the winningest teams of the last 18 years and find similar ruts. The Colts are in one now, as are the Ravens, and the Saints are just coming out of one. The Steelers missed the playoffs in 2013 and 14. The Eagles went through ugly endings for each of their last 2 head coaches. The Packers have been pretty consistent, but even they have a 4-12 and a 6-10 in there. And then there's the Patriots, who found Denver on Sunday night in a weak moment and took the Broncos to their knees. Brady's 40, Belichick's 65, and the machine just keeps humming along. That's not to say there weren't bumps earlier in the year. The defense looked lost in September, and the offense had to adjust its identity without Julian Edelman. And Brady was taking too many hits. But like clockwork, some of the problems got fixed, some of them the coaches learned to manage, And now we're closing in on Thanksgiving, and the Patriots are 7-2 and look like a lock to play on championship weekend for a 7th straight year. So, will they get back to the Super Bowl? Will they win a 6th championship? That part of all of this is up in the air. But once again, they've given themselves a great shot at getting back there. That much hasn't changed in forever. And that much, when you hold it up against where the Patriots' peers have been, is pretty damn incredible.